9:06 the time. It's Wake Up Wyoming. Hold those calls for just a bit because we got a guest on the line here, and then we'll go ahead and get back to open phones. Harriet Hageman joins us. Are you in state or out of state?
I am in state.
Okay.
I am in Cheyenne, Wyoming right now, and I'm heading to Casper tomorrow.
Okay. Now, I just one item before we get into what you're calling about today. Just want to make sure you know you're not making the right people mad enough, and I need you to do a little bit more. Step it up a bit so I have more to talk about. Can you help me out there?
What did I do?
I'm sure if you got out there and just made a little bit more noise on things like what we're going to talk about. Apparently, there's some good news on the border.
I don't know. I haven't heard that. Have you heard there's a deal?
I don't know. Okay. All right. I thought there was something good going on maybe on the border, but then again, I do know that Biden said he was going to do something about it, but that doesn't give me a lot of hope.
That shouldn't give you a lot of hope.
No, it really
that
doesn't.
should not, under any circumstance, give you a lot of hope, because I don't anticipate that he's going to do anything. What's interesting, though, is the Supreme Court ruled yesterday in a 5-4 decision that that the feds could cut the razor wire.
Yeah.
They didn't issue a written opinion with that, which they should have if they were going to make that decision. But they must be going on some kind of an idea that only the president, only the feds have the authority to address border issues. Well, if that's true, we're going to get Donald Trump elected in November, and they better not backtrack on any of that.
Okay.
That's the only silver lining I see coming out of that decision.
Well, I did mention one other thing this morning, and that would be that they can go ahead and cut that wire, but this is Texas. They have more wire.
They have more wires. That's right. Yeah. I was down there in that particular area a couple of weeks ago. I was in Eagle Pass, Texas. Mm-hmm. I was on that exact bank, and while we were there, about 6 or 7 Venezuelans came through, crossed over the razor wire, and the Border Patrol picked them up and took them for processing. While we were doing a press conference, we had people walking across the river behind us.
Right.
So it's an open border. My concern is I don't trust the Senate. I'll be very honest with you. I do not trust the Senate to actually do a border security bill.
Okay.
I trust them to do an amnesty bill. I trust them to do we're going to process everybody and we won't call it amnesty, but we'll give them all green cards or work permits bill. But I don't trust them to do a border security bill, because if they wanted to do a border security bill, they would pass H.R. 2, which we passed last year, which is the strongest border security bill ever passed by Congress.
Okay. Now, I know that we're still essentially, pardon my way for putting it, Congress is kicking the can down the road again when it comes to our deficit, but a lot of this has been held up for a bit anyway, trying to get some kind of border control into that spending bill.
That's part of it, and it's also the supplemental bill, because Joe Biden wants another $60 billion plus dollars for Ukraine, and then we're trying to get $13 billion to Israel. I will support the funding for Israel. I will not support the funding for Ukraine. We've had no audit. They will not tell us where the money is going. We do know that over 50% of the money that we have sent to Ukraine is paying for their government services, for garbage collection and for pensions and things like that. We're $34 trillion in debt. Ukraine isn't the 51st state. We have 50 states that we need to take care of right here. And until we've done that, I don't think we need to be sending money there to run their government.
Okay. So between now and the presidential election, really what can Congress do? I mean, other than swapping out presidents, what do we do here? Because we've got how many people now that have crossed the border? Over 6 million?
I think it's probably closer to 11 million.
Oh, wow.
And we have over 1 million gotaways. And keep in mind, and I've been down there, as I've said, we're very good at processing people coming in illegally into this country. If there's one thing you can say about a federal bureaucrat, they know how to fill out paperwork.
Yeah.
And so they're really good at filling out the paperwork and making sure those people get into our country. So when you're a gotaway, you are intentionally avoiding being detected, because when you come here, they give you services, they give you money, you're getting housing. So when you're trying to get in without being detected, you're bringing in the drugs. You're the human smuggler. I was visiting with a sheriff down there on the border, and he comes from a huge county, an enormous county. I think it was like the size of Rhode Island or something like that. And it's kind of like what you'd see in Goshen County, little tiny towns of 450 people and maybe a town of 3,000 and that sort of thing. They found a safe house in that county where it was a chop shop. It's where they were doing their human trafficking. They were doing massive amounts of drug dealing and drug running through that county with that safe house. It was a warehouse, an abandoned warehouse. They didn't even know it was operating. By the time that they went in there, this was a multi-million dollar business being run in his county, in this little tiny rural county out in the middle of nowhere. And I think that ought to give everybody pause about what's going on in that border, because that could be happening in Goshen County, Wyoming.
Yeah, and it is affecting the entire nation as well, because it's not just the flood over those border towns, as small as they are, like you just mentioned, but these people then pour into the rest of the country, and I think that affects everything across, especially those sanctuary cities that are complaining about having to be sanctuary cities.
Well, it affects everything just because of it's a deflection of resources to something we shouldn't be spending these resources on. So right now, one of the big battles we're having in Congress is that the Biden administration in the state of New York has taken over a national park and put up tents to the tune of millions of dollars in expenses, and they're housing illegal aliens in our national parks. Okay, think about that. They're housing illegal aliens in national parks in big, huge tent cities. Well, New York is notoriously rainy, but when it rains there, that particular national park floods. So what did they have to do? They had to close down a high school, put all the kids in remote learning so that they could convert that high school to an immigrant processing center and living center. And somebody got in there and they were doing filming. It's unbelievable what they're doing to our cities, what they're doing to our water tables with the waste and the filth. All of the things are affecting us. And we have an administration that is absolutely unwilling to secure that border, which tells you, so when we went down to Eagle Pass, in the previous 3 to 4 days, they had been processing literally thousands of people a day through Eagle Pass, Texas. When we were there, they had maybe 165 people. They knew we were coming. They notified them that they were coming, and they were able to shut down the flood of illegals coming across that border the day that we were there. What that tells me is that this administration is in contact with the cartels, because they're the ones that are doing the human trafficking, and they have the ability to shut down these flood of illegals. All they have to do is a Remain in Mexico policy. All they have to do is re-implement the policy that you have to seek asylum in the first safe country that you come to. All of those are just some of the simple things they would have to do, and they could stop that flood. They couldn't do it. They won't. They are invading our country intentionally.
Okay, so now to allow the flood is one thing. To stop it, of course, let's say we actually did that. How do you reverse course?
They're going to have to deport.
Yeah.
I know people don't want to talk about that, but we don't have any choice. We're going to have to deport. There is one of the things that I've been terribly concerned about, because I've been reading about it for a while. Some of these countries in South America especially are unloading people out of mental institution and prisons, and they're sending them north. They don't want to pay for them anymore. They don't want to have to take care of them. They just arrested a guy from Colombia who had been convicted in Colombia for murder and released in prison, and they have found him here in the United States. They've got a guy, I mean, you just read these horrific stories. The little autistic girl that was raped in her bed and murdered by the MS-13 gang member. We have got the worst of the worst coming into this country. We've got others that are, I'm not saying they're all that, but there are enough of them. And why we would want to be bringing people like that into our country with absolutely no idea of where they're going is just stunning to me.
It also is stunning to me that we can't force the hand of the Biden administration to make them enforce what's law on the books.
Look what the United States Supreme Court did yesterday.
Yeah.
Look what they did yesterday by saying that Texas cannot put up the razor wire. As you say, and Ken Paxton and Governor Abbott, whom I met just a couple of weeks ago, they both said, we're not done yet. We're going to continue fighting, and they have the right to fight. But look at what our courts are doing. And you have judges who are so far removed from the consequences of these horrible decisions that this is what they're doing.
Okay. So what is currently being worked on? Again, between now and the next election, you must be doing something, as much damage control as you can. Okay.
Well, we're doing as much damage control as we can. One of the problems that we have is we have a very slim majority, and we don't have the Senate. And the Senate has just absolutely failed us on so many levels. We have passed very good bills, very good conservative bills out of the House of Representatives. The Senate won't take them up. H.R. 2 is an example. H.R. 1, which is an energy security bill, they won't take it up. H.R. 5, Parents' Bill of Rights, they won't take it up. There are a couple of things that I'm working on. One is very important, and that is adopting a civil rights statute so that we can hold federal employees accountable for violating our First Amendment rights. I know you've probably read about the fact that we have the FBI surveilling Catholics, claiming that they may be violent extremists. And so they've been surveilling Catholics. We know what they've done at school board meetings and things like that. And so what I've done is I'm working with a representative named Dan Bishop, and we've put together the First Amendment Protection Act. And what that would do is for any federal employee that violates someone's freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, freedom to petition our government, they could be personally, financially liable to that person for violating their rights. Right now, we don't have any ability to hold these FBI agents accountable for their bad acts. If we pass my bill, we will have a civil rights statute in place that would allow us to do that. I've been working with Professor Turley on it. He thinks it's a great bill. I'm excited about getting this moving forward. So that's one thing I will work on. I'm going to continue working on the Indian health services and Indian property rights issues this year. So those are some of the things that are high priorities for me. And we're going to continue fighting back against these ideas of things like natural asset companies. Because while we beat that back last week, and I'm very excited to report that the SEC has pulled that rule, we do know that they're going to come back with something because they got to find a way to fund the BLM landscape rule. And this is the way they were going to do it, by having the Chinese Communist Party and people like Bill Gates buy the natural assets of our national parks and national federal lands.
So you're going to be in Casper, Wyoming for what?
Tomorrow I'm going to be in Casper, and I've got meetings up there, and Thursday night I have a town hall.
Okay. Where do people go for the town hall?
I don't remember off the top of my
Okay. That's okay. Yeah. Bring notes next time.
You can go to our website and you can find it out. I know. Oh, it's the airport. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's the airport.
Okay.
Yeah, I realized it was someplace a little bit different this time, and I'm thinking, where did we do that? It's going to be out at the airport.
Be out at the airport. All right. Harriet, thanks for coming on this morning.